Hello students, this is Shweta Roy. This video is for Chapter 2, Part 4, History, Socialism in Europe and the Russian Revolution. In this video, we are going to discuss about the topic, what changed after October. The Civil War, making a socialist society, Stalinism and collectivization. These are some of the important topics which we are going to discuss in this video. Now we will discuss about what changed after October. As you know, the Bolsheviks were totally opposed to private properties. So most of the industry and banks were nationalized in November 1917. That means the government took over ownership and management. Land was declared social property and now peasants were allowed to seize the land of the nobility. In cities, Bolsheviks enforced the partition of large houses according to family requirements. Also, they banned the use of the old titles of aristocracy. To assert the change, there was a new uniform which was designed for army and officials. Also, a clothing competition was organized in 1918 when the Soviet hat was chosen. Here in the picture you can see a soldier wearing the Soviet hat. Now the Bolshevik party was renamed the Russian Communist Party. And in November 1970, they conducted the election to the Constituent Assembly. But they failed to gain majority support. So in January 1918, the assembly rejected Bolshevik measures and Lenin dismissed the assembly. He thought that the Russian Congress of Soviets was more democratic than an assembly elected in uncertain conditions. Now in March 1918, despite opposition by their political allies, the Bolsheviks made peace with Germany at Brest-Litovsk. In the following year, Bolsheviks become the only party to participate in the election to the All Russian Congress of Soviets, which became the parliament of the country. Now Russia became a one-party state. Trade unions were kept under party control and the secret police punished those who criticized the Bolsheviks. Many young writers and artisans rallied to the party because it stood for socialism and for change. After October 1917, this led to experiments in the arts and architecture. But many became disillusioned because of the censorship the party encouraged. Here you can see in figure 13, it is May Day demonstration in Moscow in 1918. Now we have two views for the October Revolution and the Russian countryside. This is from the Feder below, the history of a Soviet collective farm. News of the revolutionary uprising of October 25, 1917 reached the village the following day and was greeted with enthusiasm. To the peasants, it meant free land and an end to the war. The day the news arrived, the landowner's manor house was looted, his stock farms were requisitioned, and his vast orchard was cut down and sold to the peasants for wood. All his farm buildings were torn down and left in ruins, while the land was distributed among the peasants who were prepared to live the new Soviet life. We have another extract from Serge Skeminan, Echoes of Native Land, 2 Centuries of a Russian Village, 1997. A member of a land-owning family wrote to a relative about what happened at the estate. The coup happened quite painlessly, quietly and peacefully. The first days were unbearable. Mikhail Mikhailovich, the estate owner, was calm. The girls also, I must say, the chairman behaved correctly and even politely. We were left 2 cows and 2 horses. The servants tell them all the time not to bother us. Let them leave. We vouch for their safety and property. We want them treated as humanly as possible. There are rumors that several villages are trying to evict the committees and return the estate to Mikhail Mikhailovich. I don't know if this will happen or if it's good for us, but we rejoice that there is a conscience of our people. Now we will discuss about the Civil War. When the Bolsheviks ordered land redistribution, the Russian army began to break up. Soldiers, who were mostly peasants, wished to go home for the redistribution and deserted. Non-Bolshevik socialists, liberal and supporters of autocracy condemned the Bolshevik uprising. Their leaders moved to South Russia and organized troops to fight the Bolsheviks. During 1918 and 1919, the Greens, who were socialist revolutionaries, and Whites, who were pro-Tsarists, controlled most of the Russian empire. They were backed by French, American, British and Japanese troops. All those forces who were worried at the growth of socialism in Russia. Now, as these troops and the Bolsheviks fought a civil war, looting, banditry and famine became common. Now, supporters of private property among whites took harsh steps with peasants who had seized land, and such actions led to the loss of popular support for the non-Bolsheviks. By January 1920, the Bolsheviks controlled most of the former Russian Empire. They succeeded due to cooperation with non-Russian nationalists and Muslim Jadidists. With this, you have an activity here. Read the 2 views on the revolution in the countryside, which we just discussed. Imagine yourself to be a witness to the events. Write a short account from the standpoint of an owner of an estate, a small peasant, a journalist. Do this activity. They succeeded because of the non-Russian nationalists and Muslim Jadidists. However, the cooperation did not work, where Russian colonists themselves turned into Bolshevik. In Khiva, in Central Asia, Bolshevik colonists brutally massacred local nationalists in name of defending socialism. Now, in this situation, many were confused about what the Bolshevik government represented. As a remedy to this, most non-Russian nationalists were given political autonomy in Soviet Union. The state the Bolsheviks created from the Russian Empire in December 1922. But this was combined with unpopular policies which Bolsheviks forced the local government to follow, like the harsh discouragement of nomadism. Attempts to win over different nationalities were only partly successful. With this, you have an activity. Why did people in Central Asia respond to the Russian Revolution in different way? Again, we have some extracts. So here we have Central Asia of the October Revolution, and we have two views regarding this. So first we have M.N. Roy, Memoirs, 1964. M.N. Roy was an Indian revolutionary, a founder of a Mexican Communist Party and prominent Comintern leader in India, China and Europe. He was in Central Asia at the time of the Civil War in 1920s, and he wrote, "The chieftains was a benevolent old man, his attendant, a youth who spoke Russian. He had heard of the revolution which had overthrown the Tsar and driven away the generals who conquered the homeland of the Kyrgyz. So the revolution meant that the Kyrgyz were masters of their home again. Long live the revolution, shouted the Kyrgyz youth, who seemed to be a born Bolshevik. The whole tribe joined." Now we have second view. The Kyrgyz welcomed the first revolution, that is February Revolution, with joy, and second revolution with consternation and terror. First revolution freed them from the oppression of the Tsarist regime and strengthened their hope that autonomy would be released. The second revolution, which is October Revolution, was accompanied by violence, pillage, taxes and the establishment of dictatorial power. Once a small group of Tsarist bureaucrats oppressed the Kyrgyz, now the same group of people perpetuate the same regime. Kazak's leader in 1919, quoted in Alexander Benningsen and Chant Kwelkweze, in 1960. Now we have making a socialist society. So during Civil War, the Bolsheviks kept industries and banks nationalized, and they permitted peasants to cultivate the land that had been socialized. So Bolsheviks used confiscated land to demonstrate what collective work could be. Also, a process of centralized planning was introduced. Officials assessed how the economy could work and set targets for a 5-year period. So on this basis, they made 5-year plans, and the government fixed all prices to promote industrial growth during the first two plans, which was 1927 to 1932 and 1933 to 1938. Now this planning led to economic growth. Industrial production increased between 1929 and 1933 by 100% in the case of oil, coal and steel. Also new factory cities came into being. However, this rapid construction led to poor working conditions. In the city of Magnitogorsk, the construction of a steel plant was achieved in 3 years. Workers lived hard lives and result was 550 stoppages of work in the first year alone. Now in living quarters in winter time at 40 degrees below, people had to climb down for the 4th floor and cross the street in order to go to the toilet. That was the condition of the workers. Socialist cultivation in a village in the Ukraine. We have extract from the history of a Soviet collection farm 1955, Fedor Belov. A commune was set up using 2 confiscated farms as a base. The commune consisted of 13 families with a total of 70 persons. The farm tools taken from the farms were turned over the commune. The members ate in a communal dining hall and income was divided in accordance with the principles of cooperative communism. The entire proceeds of the members' labor as well as all dwellings and facilities belonging to the commune were shared by the commune members. This is the factories came to be seen as a symbol of socialism. This poster states the smoke from the chimneys is the breathing of the Soviet Russia. Also you can say different pictures in figure 15. Children at school in Soviet Russia in 1930s and they are studying the Soviet economy. Now in figure 16, a child in Magnitogorsk during the first 5-year plan and he is working for Soviet Russia. Now in figure 17, factory dining hall in 1930s. Here we have dreams and realities of a Soviet childhood in 1933. So here we have a letter. We will go through this. Dear grandfather Kalinin, my family is large. There are 4 children. We don't have a father. He died fighting for the workers' cause and my mother is ailing. I want to study very much but I cannot go to school. I had some old boots but they are completely torn and no one can mend them. My mother is sick, we have no money and no bread, but I want to study very much. There stands before us the task of studying and studying. That is what Vladimir Ilyich Lenin said. But I have to stop going to school. We have no relatives and there is no one to help us. So I have to go to work in a factory to prevent the family from starving. Dear grandfather, I am 13. I study well and have no bad reports. I am in class 5. Letter of 1933 from a 13-year-old worker to Kalinin, Soviet president. Now we have the topic Stalinism and collectivization. Now, the period of early planned economy was linked to the disaster of the collectivization of agriculture. By 1927 and 28, the towns which were there in Soviet Russia were facing an acute problem of grain supplies. The government fixed the price at which grains must be sold, but the peasants refused to sell their grain to government buyers at these prices. Stalin, who headed the party after the death of Lenin, introduced firm emergency measures. He believed that rich peasants and traders in the countryside were holding stocks in the hope of higher prices. Speculation had to be stopped and supplies confiscated. Now in 1928, party members stored the grain producing areas, supervising enforced grain collections and raiding kulaks, the name for well-to-do peasants. But the shortage continued and the decision was taken to collectivize farms. It was argued that grain shortages were partly due to the small size of holding. After 1917, land had been given over to peasants, and these small sized peasant farms could not be modernized. To develop modern farms and run them along industrial lines with machineries, it was necessary to eliminate kulaks, take away land from peasants and establish state-controlled large farms. Now here you have a figure, and in this a poster during collectivization. It states, "We shall strike at the kula, working for the decrease in cultivation." Now from 1929, the party forced all peasants to cultivate in collective farms, and the bulk of land and implements were transferred to the ownership of collective farms. Now peasants worked on the land and the kolkhoz's profit was shared. Enraged peasants resisted the authorities and destroyed their livestock. Between 1929 and 1931, the number of cattle fell by 1/3, and those who resisted collectivization were severely punished. Many were deported and exiled. As they resisted collectivization, peasants argued that they were not rich and they were not against socialism. They merely did not want to work in collective farms for a variety of reasons. So Stalin's government allowed some independent cultivation but treated such cultivators unsympathetically. Unsympathetically. With the collectivization also, the production did not increase immediately, and there was bad harvest in 1930 to 1933, which led to one of the most devastating famines in Soviet history. In this, over 4 million people were dead. Many within the party criticized the confusion in industrial production under the planned economy and the consequences of collectivization. Now Stalin and his sympathizers charged these critics with conspiracy against socialism. Accusations were made throughout the country, and by 1939 over 2 million were in prisons or labor camps. Most were innocent of the crimes, but no one spoke for them. A large number were forced to make false confessions under torture and were executed. Several among them were talented professionals. So this was the situation. I hope you all understood the topics which we discussed in this video. Thank you.